I want to go to my guest though. I am joined with the man himself, Ford Fischer. Ford, I don't think I've ever had you on this channel, and so I'm glad that you joined me, man. Thank you for this.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Good morning.
And just so the audience will know, Ford Fischer, he is right here, independent journalist, videographer, editor, computer scientist, web designer. His work has been featured on CNN, Fox, MSNBC, ABC, and more. Hell, you were even featured on Congress, despite the fact that they took your channel down for a while for the January 6th photography.
Demonetized my channel, I will say. They took some of the content down and they demonetized it. The channel survived, and when enough people spoke out, I mean, it's a testament to the power of activism. When enough people got mad about it, they did call it an over-enforcement and gave me the monetization back.
Do you know they did the same thing to my channel at the exact same time, and they sent me that same letter saying, we over-enforced our policy. And it's like, what the hell does that mean? How do you over-enforce?
It's a very, very strange term. And I think it's so clear that what over-enforced means is sort of like, we realized that there was public outcry about this, right? It's what disturbed me about it is that the over-enforcement should be fixed no matter how popular the person is. And there are certainly people who are affected by that kind of enforcement mechanism that have no resolve whatsoever. No way to.
I mean, even the premise of over-enforcement. Well, how do you over-enforce? Like, it's just either you have rules that are clear-cut or you don't. And the people, like, I take great issue when, let's say you're videotaping January 6th and you are filming reality. This is the reality of what was taking place. And they're like, we don't want America to see that reality, so we need to take your video down. Or we need to demonetize your channel to try to lessen the number of people who would see it or disincentivize you from putting it up. That's outrageous. That's outrageous.
Yeah, their premise, like because they actually did provide a human explanation of it. What they claimed is that even though my footage was just raw, here's exactly what happened, that because people in it, namely at the time, the president of the United States, Trump, made claims of outcome determinative election fraud, which were considered to be false. Therefore, because I did not basically declaratively make a statement that statements made in my video are false, that I'm allowing the president to speak in my video, and therefore that the video contains election disinformation. There was actually, it was Inauguration Day at precisely 2 weeks after January 6th that I received a suspension, and the reason for that was I was filming protesters at the inauguration, and there was a guy who, and these protesters were like anti-LGBT, like that kind of thing, and there was literally a shirtless man yelled at them from across the street. I remember the words exactly how they were said because I watched it so many times because of this issue. He said, "I still believe the election was stolen, but you, sir, are preaching the wrong form of Christianity." That was the sentence that the man said that I got suspended for filming him saying. And their reasoning was him saying the words, "I still believe the election was stolen," constituted election disinformation that was inside of my video. So if one person, right, if you're trying to get someone banned off YouTube, right, someone's filming you and you don't want them filming, just yell "election stolen," right? Maybe YouTube will take it.
That's outrageous. Some random protest. That is outrageous.
Guy, yeah.
Did they reinstall your channel? Did they take away that suspension, or they kept that suspension on?
So that suspension was, this is a little bit in the weeds, but the suspension was permanent. I'm sorry, the suspension was temporary already. The suspension was already not going to be permanent. And the reason it was a suspension rather than a warning, they considered it a second strike because of another warning, which was also for filming live on January 6th. And I did actually manage to communicate with people at YouTube who agreed that the underlying first warning had been wrong and did ultimately void all of the enforcement mechanisms. But again, it was interesting because those remedies of me like really being able to have a back and forth conversation with them was clearly because I had made it a viral subject, right? If I didn't have a large audience that would have advocated for me, then it would have been impossible to do that kind of arguing in the first place, to even have them listen to you.
God, man, faceless entity thing is terrifying.
And especially when it's robots doing the enforcement, right? Like they never acknowledge this, but my belief is that it probably is based on essentially a transcription, right? Like a computer sees all of the words that are said in it, and that's why it's devoid of context. It's not thinking about the difference between like you and me having a conversation. I'm responsible for the words I say. You're responsible for the words you say. But there's a difference in context when I just quoted somebody saying something. It's different than if I were saying it because it's my own thought, right? A computer doesn't understand that the way that a human would, the way that your audience would.
And it's ironic because YouTube lives off of, what is the section? Oh God, I haven't hit this thing for so long.
I'm sure that's what you're saying.
230, which means that if somebody says something on the platform, YouTube doesn't get in trouble for the thing that the person said on the platform. And yet, when somebody says something in the video, YouTube will still ding you for it. And it's like, are you serious right now? Like, it's the faceless entity where you're working on a platform to make a living off that platform, but you have no idea. Any random day say, hey, we found a video of yours from 3 years ago where Rando said this, and so we're taking your channel down. It's like,
yeah,
are you serious?
I hadn't thought of it that way, but that's a good analogy, right? The analogous Section 230 protection would be that if I film someone saying something, I shouldn't be held to account the same way as if I said the thing, right?
Exactly.
Because you're right, the companies benefit from that same distinction.
Protection. Yeah. For Fisher, I brought you on because I saw this video that you put out. And God, man, the ICE raids have been insane. And there's something else associated with these raids that I want to point out. CNN just did a polling. I don't know if CNN did the polling or reading the polling, but Donald Trump or the Republicans in regards to immigration has gone up like 20 points since the last time they did this particular polling on the issue of immigration. And so the Republicans are beating the Democrats like 33 points or some insane amount of number. And that is despite the fact that things like this were filmed protests for ICE because, they're out there just knocking down people's doors and whatnot. Even though the people may be innocent, ICE doesn't seem to care about all of that. And the fact that they're wearing this kind of Gestapo face coverings get across something. Why can't you show your face? The audience can't see, but there's a priest that got shot in the face.
Right.
Now, you have plenty of these videos. I'm only going to show this one. I mean, I could show the other one where the woman was hit by a truck and then they came out and shot her in the face. The one with Captain America, which was weirder. It's just a little stranger. And you pointed out that they were talking about moving that facility from Chicago to somewhere else, to a more clandestine location where the protests wouldn't keep showing up repeatedly like that. Give me your context. What was taking place on the ground while you were there?
Right. So let me first say, just as part of kind of wider context, I live closer to Washington, D.C., where Trump recently did kind of make these moves to exert a lot more federal control of the district, right? So whereas before there's already tons of different police forces, MPD, Capitol Police, Secret Service, Parks Police, blah, 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 right? They now added the National Guard. And first that was the DC National Guard. Then a bunch of Republican states allowed their National Guards to go. There was also for 1 month the federalization of MPD. So the local cops technically were kind of under the command of Trump. And then there was the deployment of federal agents. And so over the last month, DC has sort of turned into this space where frontline day-to-day law enforcement operations are kind of done more so by the federal government. And a huge portion of why he's doing that is very obviously immigration enforcement. And so you have Customs and Border Patrol and ICE. Often these guys are dressed up as, or I shouldn't say dressed up as, but what they're marked as is DHS or HSI, basically just wider Homeland Security. And clearly the purpose of them is to create a federal presence so that they can then sort of arrest people who they determine to be undocumented. Trump had for a while alluded to the idea that he would make similar moves in Illinois. And sort of a big difference between Washington, D.C. and Illinois is that while D.C. is not a state and does not have states' rights, and so the mayor was really in this kind of in-between place where to some extent she said, we don't want this, but to some extent she said, we welcome it. Illinois, both the mayor of Chicago and the governor of Illinois have been much more ardent that, like, we don't want this. They're signing executive orders saying things like the police are not going to be assisting with ICE, would not be assisting with National Guardsmen. And so Trump sort of backed down in part. Trump did not end up deploying the National Guard, which is something that he said he would do into Illinois. But he did launch what he called Operation Midway Blitz. And basically what this is that he has put a lot of federal agents, especially into the Chicago area. But they're acting alone. They are my observation on the ground, but also what I understand to be sort of the policy there is that the police are not assisting them. The feds are doing this. And so what that's looked like in practice over the last couple of weeks, again, my understanding both from news reporting and from speaking to people on the ground there, including families of some of the people who have been picked up this way, is that they have targets that they basically know of, people who either have had visas revoked or for whatever reason they determined to be present illegally. And they're basically showing up in unmarked vehicles, highly militarized appearances, and they hop out, and the whole situation is done in less than 3 minutes. They show up, they grab somebody who is supposed to be so allegedly targeted or specifically identified, sort of thrown into a vehicle and then taken somewhere. And so the question kind of is, where are they taken to? And so this particular facility that I was filming these protests at, both of the videos that you just showed, is in Broadview, Illinois. And so this is a suburb of Chicago, roughly 20 or 30 minutes west of downtown Chicago. And vehicles are going in and out of that facility basically all day. That ICE agents and so forth are leaving, and then they're coming back with people who they essentially just captured in the manner that I described to you. And so activists, particularly every Friday, and so now there have been 2 of these Inflamed Fridays, and it's actually my intention to go back there in a few days, have been trying to basically be disruptive of it. And so the tactic, although they're not using sort of direct violence, they're not really assaulting the agents, right? Or the tactic is not to like fight them physically, but they are trying to blockade it, where they basically stand in front of the driveway and try to prevent vehicles from going in and out. And while they are certainly overwhelmed with enormous force as they do so, and it would be fantastical to believe that this would actually prevent deportations from taking place, I think it's slowing them down, right? It does appear to be effective in insofar as it's at least causing them to be, literally just slower or disrupted to some degree as they're doing it. Now, the reporting that you're describing, this was a really interesting little nugget of time that happened, is that Sunday night, so placing this in context, this is 2 days after the biggest flare-up, which was Friday. On Sunday night, the Huffington Post reported that they had seen communications from inside DHS showing that the Broadview facility was going to be evacuated and its operations relocated. And this was followed up very quickly, like within hours, with an update that said that they had seen new communications suggesting that those plans had been canceled, which is a different wording from the comment that they then received from DHS, where DHS called it false that there had ever been such a plan. And so it leaves a few possibilities, right? It is possible that Huffington Post is correct, that they genuinely somehow came into information that the facility was going to move, and that there was then a change of heart of some kind, and the facility ended up staying. It is possible that the story was planted, and I don't mean that Huffington Post necessarily did something ingenuine by ending up publishing it. But for example, it is not insane to think that the feds would essentially give them false information so that then once they report it, they could discredit them basically by saying that wasn't true. I think that from the perspective of the public right now, and to be clear, I can only see what I've seen online, right? This isn't something I've been able to look at more closely, right? Like, or from the background, I should say. It's unclear exactly how that path of events ended up happening. But again, I do plan to go and document it. It'll be interesting to see what comes of it this Friday. It would also be interesting if, for example, they do plan to move, and then they said that they wouldn't, so that the protesters would end up at the wrong spot, right? All of these things, I suppose, are possible.
Do you think that these are going to grow? I mean, I have to be honest, looking at the polling on this from the standpoint of Democrats and Republicans winning on this immigration issue, you would think, or at the very least, I would hope that Americans would. It's one thing if Donald Trump was like, we're going to go after violent criminals. Okay, everybody, I don't know how many people in the country would disagree with that, right? That's not really what's taking place, though. I mean, I could show you events where they blow up somebody's door and go snatch people who are Americans, like meaning they're getting wrong people over and over and over again, hanging out at courthouses where the judge is like, okay, we're going to extend your stay in the country, and the ICE agents grab the guy, meaning they're doing this without due process in many of these situations, which inflames the audience, inflames the crowd to say, this is not America that we're okay with. We're not okay with this, in which case you get resistance for it. Do you think these protests are going to expand, whether in Chicago, whether in California? Gavin Newsom just passed a law that they have already said we're not going to pay attention to. Effectively, you can't cover your face. Mm-hmm. Do you think this is going to get worse is the question. We have about a couple of minutes left.
Sure. Yeah. I think that it's complicated to predict that. I covered a lot of protests during Trump's first term, and particularly in the Washington, D.C. area, it used to be like, oh, protests are like brunch, right? Like that you could pick you could say, I'm going to go participate in a protest on Saturday, and you could find one that would be there, right? Like there was just stuff like practically every day, but certainly every weekend. And that vibe has really changed here in Trump's second term. And I don't think it's because the types of people who would protest are any less passionate about it. But I do think that there's a sense of fear, and there's probably a sense of helplessness as well. But particularly with President Trump designating, for example, Antifa a terrorist organization, which is now very much uncharted territory, right? Like terrorist designations historically, and in terms of what legal apparatus exists, is really about foreign organizations, right? You can designate some foreign group, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, whatever, right? And then that has the legal implication of if you provide them material support, then you've committed a crime. Domestic organizations, the president may certainly disregard or may regard in a disfavorable way, but there hasn't ever really been a test run on what it means to call an organization a terrorist organization. Again, if it was foreign, then, for example, providing money, donating to Antifa, whatever counts as Antifa, would be a crime. In the context of domestic, I don't think that there's a legal apparatus to treat it that way, but it's unclear. Again, it's just in uncharted territory, and I think that does make people nervous. But more to the question. So now I've been in LA, where there was pretty direct fighting, and pretty specifically over kind of the same purpose as Illinois, the idea of trying to kind of just hinder to the extent possible the deportation machine, so to speak, right? Just literally putting yourself in the way to stop that kind of stuff. We saw that in LA, and that escalated kind of into riots. At the Broadview facility, I'm seeing the same kind of tactic be used. But that's two cities, and this is a federal operation. And so the question, does it rise or does it spread? I think it kind of remains to be seen, because there are also cities like Washington, D.C., where there have been a handful of massive protests, but they have not turned adversarial in the same way. And direct confrontation with ICE has mostly been limited to the extent that people figure out where they are. They go and just sort of yell at them. Memphis, Tennessee, Trump said sending in the National Guard, and basically their governor and their mayor said, cool, that sounds great, right? And my understanding is that there hasn't really been any highly organized protests. So I think it's going to end up depending on the particular city. I would imagine that there will be other kind of kinetic demonstrations as operations like Operation Midway Blitz continue to take place in new places. But we really will see, and I think it'll vary city to city.
Wow. Ford, thank you for this. The audience member was like, please bring this guy back for additional updates. I would love to have you back to give additional updates on this. By the way, one last question real quick.
Sure.
Well, you actually answered that. DC. I lived in DC for the last 5 years. So it's amazing to me of what's taking place. Donald Trump put those people, put the National Guard in areas that are effectively the more ritzy areas of DC, effectively the low crime areas of DC. It's just weird.
I found it to be very aesthetic focused. I think that the National Guardsmen are largely standing around and not doing very much, but I think that it's supposed to be high visibility. Whereas my experience with the feds is I've spent probably 10 now evenings attempting to document the feds, like literally being in areas where there's been the most sightings of them, and then rushing often with other journalists to try to get to them when there's sightings of them. And I've managed to film a couple of checkpoints, right? And just a handful of times of feds like literally standing around and stuff. And my impression has been that they want the feds to be more like secret operators, right? That they show up and people aren't expecting them, so they can kind of have a blitz, right, against whatever their target is. Whereas the National Guard, they're just standing there with big guns and like drinking coffee and like doing nothing, but people see them.
Visibility. Wow. Ford Fischer, independent journalist, videographer, editor, a computer scientist, web designer. His work has been featured on CNN, Fox, MSNBC, ABC, and founder of N2, I think this is...
N2S Reports is just the handle for News to Share.
Oh, okay, fair enough. Where can people find your work, though? Like, if they wanted to check out what you've been doing.
Yeah, so on Twitter, or now it's X, it's at Ford Fischer, which is the handle that I have typed there. The channel is called News to Share. It's News, the number 2 Share, and that's both on Facebook and YouTube. And I have the website is news2share.com. That's news, the number 2 share.com.
Excellent. Ford, thank you for this, man. You be safe. Have a good rest of your day, okay?
Thank you for having me.
All right.